Hi everyone, and welcome to this evening's debate on a very hyped topic, I would say, DevOps versus NoOps. So today we've got two teams of, very enthusiastic software engineers, I must say, who will be debating this topic out amongst themselves. We can perhaps expect them to touch on a couple of industry best practices, sort of, including seamless testing experiences, achieving build automation and continuous deployment, and constant monitoring. So the team speaking for DevOps is led by Supun Mututantri, who comes with experiences in both DevOps as well as sort of non-DevOps environments. And joining him, we have Asari Varnakula Surya, who shares Sukun's passion as well for basically open source technologies. And is a keen DevOps enthusiast. And their team is made complete with Milindu Kumarage, who is suitably nicknamed after his skills for handling Go CD pipelines. I will not repeat that in this forum. And so speaking for NoOps, we have the team led by Janita Samarasinghe, who couldn't really find anything fun to say about his team, except for the fact that they have all had their fair share of experiences donning the ops hat in a DevOps culture. And joining Janitha, we have Pulasti Haraskama, who treasures his production environments and doesn't let anyone touch it. And we have Nandula Jayamaha, who loves data, ETL Technologies, data warehousing, you name it, he loves it. So, okay, guys, let's give them a round of applause. Mithila will be helping keep time today. So basically, each of them will have 5 minutes to defend their arguments, and once they've battled it out amongst themselves, the floor will be open for questions. So we'll have about 5 minutes of questions and answers, and then we would like to conclude with a vote of hands for DevOps or no ops. You guys, Mithila will give one tap on the table when it's 4 minutes. So you want to just do a tap? Okay. So that's your cue to say that you've got just another minute to conclude, and 2 taps when your time is up, basically. All right. So without much further ado, let's commence this evening's debate. So Supun, over to you.
It's not about the big that eats more anymore. It's about the fast that eats slow. Regardless of whether your company is a Fortune 100 company or not, if your company is not being able to function efficiently, more or less will end up crashing down at some point in time. So there are plenty of examples that I can provide where the so-called big companies who lost its fortune overnight, and so-called small startups that revolutionize how we see things in the IT industry. So all these are due to the way that these function for a long period of time. Here we can identify 4 key factors that actually sustain organizational positioning in its competitive environment. So these are being fast, efficient, flexible, secure, and sustainable. Okay.
Right. So, all right, working now. So one way of achieving all these key factors is through DevOps, having DevOps principles and practices. So what is DevOps? DevOps is a combination of cultural philosophies and practices that will increase organizations' ability to build, test, and release software faster and more efficiently. It's more or less about removing the traditional barrier between the two siloed systems, which is siloed teams, I would rather say, which is development and ops, which was there. So how being fast would allow the organization to achieve or surpass its competitors. So with having a efficient software development lifecycle process, it will allow the organization to better serve its customers. So with less communication overhead, with less documentation processes, it will save so much time that will reduce the lifecycle process time and allow the customers to see something worthwhile and something progress is happening. So flexibility, when it comes to flexibility is all about how organization could absorb changes. So whenever, if it's about a production issue or anything, the customers will come up with several changes. So how flexible your team is to achieve these tasks would matter a lot. And when it comes to security is another key feature that we need to have at our vicinity. It is more with DevOps principles and practices through continuous integration and continuous delivery. It is teams could test the software for functional safety before sending out to production or anything else. So in that way, you can make sure that your product or software is much more safe and secure. So when it comes to stability, a stable product doesn't mean it is a good product. A good product doesn't mean it's a stable product, but a stable product will definitely save lots of money down the line. So which will allow the organization to sustain and save so much time from the organization itself. So one of the main reasons why actually Cisco thought of coming towards us is the four key factors that they saw that we could achieve, which are the fast, flexible, secure, and stability that we could bring with having DevOps in place. So it's clear that the DevOps practices in place, we could achieve all these software engineering factors that which will facilitate. So with its nature, DevOps approach will gain wide popularity across several organizations which is there. So some of the widely known companies that use DevOps approaches is Amazon, Facebook, and Netflix, Target, and so on and so forth. So what I could say is DevOps, with DevOps principles and practices, we could achieve all these key factors that would sustain our position as a company, and that would give us the edge over all the other competitors. So yes.
Thank you, Supun. And I think I'd like to call upon Janita.
All right, so is this on? Supra? Is it? All right, okay. So great speech by Supun. Got to give it to him, of course. So first off, I'd like to focus on three main things. That's the past, the present, and the future of operations. In the past, we had the Iron Age, when everything was physical and everything was in an iron box. Operations engineers or operations team had to request for, say, a RAM upgrade. They had to go to finance, go through all the leadership, and then get that piece of equipment, and then they could put it in a server and then enjoy themselves. What this led to mostly was oversized computers, because finance and the leadership don't have enough resources on their hands to always instantly give the teams what they need. So they had to always keep overcompensating, and ended up having extremely large computers that did basically nothing. So on top of that, later there came the concept of virtualization, the virtual age, when we could basically create a virtual environment on a big size computer and then give it out as separate boxes for development, operation, QA, production, and so on. So virtualization did open a few doors for operations. And then came containerization, and somewhere down the line came SDN, software-defined networks. This led to a great paradigm shift, which is when we moved to the cloud, right? So basically, we could have the whole thing automated, creation of a virtual environment, creation and basically the whole process of getting a server up and running on the cloud can be automated. So that's why it went to the cloud. So we moved to the present when we have DevOps. Something that Supun might have forgotten to mention is that there's a specific responsibility for a DevOps engineer as well. That is, they have to maintain the server in a sense. So they know what the server flavor is. They know what's going on inside. They know what the, basically, whether it's a T2 medium, T2 micro, whatever. And they also know what's the Ubuntu version or what the Windows version that's running on it. And it's in a way dangerous to give it to the hands of a developer who has very little time to spend on that, to spend on patching up all those security related problems that's inherent to the operating system or inherent to the machine itself. What we are looking at now is the future. So what's the future? Well, we must have heard of serverless computing, right? So lambdas and all that stuff. Basically, what have we done? In the past, operations engineers had a very, very strict role to play. That is to actually get that piece of metal that does the thing inside your computer. And then that was slightly given to the cloud to handle. So big giants like AWS, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft started giving out their resources for the public to use. So they've actually taken part of the operations engineer's role and automated that. So basically, the operations engineer's role is being replaced by code incrementally as we speak. In the future, with serverless computing, we will not have to maintain a server at all. We just put it into a function. It's a function as a service. We as developers only worry about coding the function of it and putting it out there. So with a proper architecture for a serverless computing environment, what we propose is that we have completely given up, mostly given up, all of the operations to the cloud or to a third party. So in that, we say that it's better to go with no ops rather than have someone spend part of their time on operations related work as well. How does that aid us, you ask? Well, you didn't ask, but anyways, I'm saying. That aids us because that frees up the mind of the developer to actually build functional requirements, something that the business needs. Not worry about, why is the Ubuntu version 17 point something not working with Java version something else. So those are things that we can give completely to the third party, which is AWS or Azure or whatever, and let them take care of that for us. So serverless for the win, and no ops for the win as well, I guess.
Thank you, Janita. And next up we have Asiri.
Thank you. So I would like to focus our attention on another aspect of this debate regarding to a current transition in the industry. So as you all know, the industry is moving towards agile culture, or it has some of the organizations have already embraced, and they are somehow in transition in the process of embracing that culture. And that culture is concerned with creating quality software in the minimum possible time with the maximum possible uptime as possible. So I propose that DevOps is a facilitator for this agile culture. And this agile thing and DevOps teams, what happens is that in such teams, all resources, all individuals are required to get something done, your product out into the open, into the wilderness, work together as one team, so full time. So each and every individual, his time is fully used up into creating this final product, which leads to balanced or integrated teams. In a standard traditional setup, where devs and ops are kind of separated, divided, the devs are concerned only about their own bit of work, trying to get their product, their requirements into functioning products, but not concerned about the whole, the outside, the outer boundaries as such. While the ops team will be pretty much worrying about getting the final product up and running in the environment without considering what product they are trying to host in the wild. So what happens is that ultimately this leads to a lot of back and forth communication, a lot of sign-offs, lots of discussions here and there, and ultimately the common thing that happens is that devs will say, okay, it works on my machine, and the ops will say, okay, and they'll try to justify their own stance, saying that okay, it doesn't work there, so it's not their problem to manage. So thusly, ultimately, all this leads to a culture of blame, and not a culture of shared responsibility. And ultimately, it will impact the inter-team dynamics as well. So I propose that DevOps culture, the teams will share their responsibility, have a shared responsibility, the devs and the teams, the ops working together, the cross-functional team, where the devs work from the start to the end, and they will manage all of the monitoring, the testing, deployments and everything in one cross-functional team, which will promote shared responsibility with closer collaboration with the teams.
Thanks, Siri, and Pulasti, you're up next.
Hi, good evening. So our first speaker, Janitha, gave an introduction to the topic, and he told us about the evolution of operations as we know it. So I'm going to be taking that discussion a little further and sort of convince you why DevOps has become obsolete in the current context of time. So one of the main arguments for DevOps is that it's better that someone who knows the code base, who has written the code base, managed the code base. It's better that someone who knows the code base manages the code base. So, but like if you actually look at maintenance in a different perspective, so why does our application need maintenance at all? So basically, if your application needs maintenance, that means it's deemed to fail, right? So if your code base is correct, if your system is correct, and your application is correct, and finally your deployment is correct, ideally your application should be able to manage itself, right? So think about it, like services such as Lambda, Elastic Beanstalks, and other services by our cloud providers have made the deployment process a black box to you. You don't care about what the underlying architecture is. You don't care about what servers it's running on, what OS it's running on. All that you care about is deployment to you is just one click of a button, okay? So ideally, you've outsourced your deployment, outsourced your operations into AWS or any cloud service provider that you're going to use. All right. So, so what's the point of having a dedicated dev resource or a dedicated operations team to take care of the parts of operations that we need to take care of? Why not let the cloud service provider do it on their own, right? So. So one of the main questions that could be asked is who's going to do the deployment, right? So if there is a complex process behind your deployment, if your deployment requires a certain amount of expertise and a lot of time, then you need to go back to your drawing board and see whether you've implemented your CI/CD pipelines properly. Like, ideally, in this world, in the current context of technology, deployments and continuous integration should be just a click of a button. It should be automated. So why spend our time on integrations when everything related to this can be automated fully, right? So another main question that people are going to ask about NoOps is who's going to pick up that the support call in the middle of the night. So say a customer has an issue, he's going to call you and he's going to ask you what's wrong with the system, it's not working. So who's going to pick up that call? So what NoOps is proposing is that once your application is correct, if your deployment is correct, if your architecture can handle itself on its own, if the proper fault tolerance is implemented, if the error handling is done gracefully, your the only problems that can arise is customer specific functionality problems, right? So for those kind of problems, the solution that NoOps is proposing is documentation. So say you have a problem with Gmail. You call Google support line and tell them that your Gmail is not working? No, right? That's simply because the first thing that you do is you go to their documentation and see whether there is a fix for this particular issue that you're facing. The next step could be FAQs and automated chatbots. So technologies such as this have made the role of DevOps obsolete in the current context of time, right? So essentially, what we are proposing is with the development of technology, with the development of new deployment architectures and deployment techniques, the role of DevOps has been shifted from a specific operations team to the developer, and finally it has been shifted to the cloud provider. Now we don't have to worry about the deployments or anything. So this all seems very theoretical. This doesn't look like it could be implemented in a real environment. Well, let me give you an example. So everybody knows about Netflix, right? So what you probably would not have heard about Netflix is that they have an agent called a Simian army. So one of the main agents in the Simian army is called a chaos monkey. So when this chaos monkey is activated, they do this routinely. They do this process like every 2 weeks. They activate a chaos monkey. So what this chaos monkey does is when it's released to the production environment, it goes and kills one of their production servers. So they have more than 100 servers running different microservices for them. And this monkey goes and kills one of their servers. So ideally, like their deployment structure is in such a way that it can bring whatever the server that was killed, it can bring it up again and get it back to a working stage, right? So along with that, the chaos monkey, they have a lot of other agents affecting the production environment. Like imagine the confidence they have about their production environment. Imagine the confidence they have releasing such an agent on the production environment, being able for the environment to come back up again and serve the customer as it needs, right? So essentially, if Netflix can reach that sort of a stage, what we are proposing is that any software development company, any developer can reach that stage where you can get rid of DevOps completely. So in summary, in summary, so basically with the development of technology, with the development of deployment architectures, DevOps has become obsolete, and NoOps is paving way for NoOps. That's the future.
Thank you very much, Purasti. So, Milind, you're up next.
Thank you. Okay, right. Have you heard about something called the world of confusion? Actually, it means that the developers has mentality of having fast change, while the ops having the mentality of having a stability, which is like enemy of fast change, which means like when you're moving fast, when you're changing fast, the stability is hard to have the stability. Like with providers like IaaS providers and platform as a service providers and tools like Docker, Kubernetes, and Rancher, like we have eliminated this wall of confusion between devs and DevOps, and like we have a paradigm shift from Dev and Ops culture into DevOps culture. And now the companies has to only worry about development, not about the operational stuff. And which also gives birth to nice concepts like infrastructure as code, which means we can have infrastructure in a code, which we don't have to have operational people managing the infrastructure. And good thing about of this thing is like that we can have policy like for monitoring security and having complaints. We can go through the code and just make sure that everything is good and right. And one thing that we get with these PaaS solutions is like monitoring and logging and etc. But is it like having all these things? But can we eliminate the role of can we eliminate the role of the operation people? Like, I'll give you one example. Like we had an issue on Saturday, which our servers had this problem, and we gathered here and we checked what's the problem, but we couldn't find anything on our logs because the Kibana was not working. So we had a surprise, like why it's not working. The problem was actually the Kibana has got out of hard disk space. Actually, the application had generated a lot of logs, like almost about 80 GB logs, which made the Kibana server go out of space, and there was no logs. Therefore, because we had access to our servers and we could investigate the issue, we could access into our server, our logs, and check the logs from there, from the Kibana itself, and get the thing sorted out. And we also could, once we had a problem where while deploying our Dockers into Rancher server, we had this problem where the container is spawning but not the service. So what we did was we accessed into the Kibana Rancher server, and then we did a deployment. And from there, once the container got spawned, we could actually get connected into the container and see what's wrong there, why the service is not spawning in the container. So so because we had access to these servers and we could actually go there and see what's wrong, we could identify we could actually check the environment variables, the connection between the services and the files that has been developed, built by our CI/CD pipelines. And therefore, we could identify the issue, and very quickly we could do the changes. And also, because we had the access there, we could do the changes there and see whether the change we do in the code actually do work. And we didn't have to do something and push the Git and make sure that the pipelines goes on and have it deployed there and pushing into the Rancher and etc. That's which means there are things that we can automate, but sometimes we have some edge cases where we have to have access directly to the server, and which means it is good to have DevOps, because the traditional way of having Ops and DevOps which really makes things hard. But when it comes to in present, we have DevOps culture, which means there is some kind of automation and some kind of people working on the code, actually going through the stuff and doing actual stuff. So I think when thinking about everything, that I propose that DevOps is the best.
Right. So talking about DevOps, so you mentioned the log situation, so we're on other space. So that means you still would need to set up the server and monitor your hard disks, monitor your memory usages, monitor your CPU usages. You need to actually see they are running out of space, then scale it up. So in NoOps culture, so basically you don't need to know about the configuration of servers. You don't need to know about what kind of instance it's running on. It's just a function. So you just pass what you want. It's like a Java code or Python code. You just tell it what to do. It'll run out of it'll do what you want. So in case you run out of space, so it manages to auto scale
if you have developed your system properly with the proper architecture, with the serverless situation to handle all of this, you should have done in development and testing all these possible scenarios that could occur and create probable failovers. In case such a situation occurs, you have some way of recovering it. So in that situations, so we can be sure that we go to production with our serverless architecture. So if we do get issue that like the Netflix has some way to manage it, and we don't have to actually have an operations person or a developer having to get up, see what's wrong with the servers, SSH servers, and see if there's a problem with the configurations or if the app is down or if there's something wrong with it. Another thing I would like to bring up is cost. So traditionally, we had an operations team and development team. We had to pay for the development team, we had to pay for the operations team, and for servers, for the infrastructure. When in a more DevOps nature, so the two teams became in a more DevOps environment, so you have both. In a more DevOps nature, so you have both working together. So it's much easier, much more flexible, and less costly than having two separate departments who are not interacting with each other and doing your own things. So next, we moved on to cloud. So we moved the infrastructure up to the cloud. So all you have to do is pay for the servers, and they will bill you for this running instances and whatever the matrices they have defined. In a more no-ops nature with serverless, you don't have to pay for the server for just letting it be idle. So most of the time, if it's not a mission critical project, which has people logging in and using it 24 hours a day, most of the time your servers will be just waiting in idle. And you will have parts of your project which will require services, but most of the services will be used very rarely. So why do you need to pay like the entire cost for a month for that server when you can have it in a serverless state where you only pay for when it is required to be used? So that's why it's a much better step forward from DevOps to go no-ops with a full serverless structure. Of course, you can't have everything serverless because currently serverless, we are just moving on to serverless. So service providers like AWS, Azure, Google, they are bringing up new serverless features. So once it becomes fully matured, you will be able to find parts of your projects that you can completely make serverless. Then those serverless components, you won't need any operations people or a developer to manage those operation parts. So that's what we are saying. So I'm not saying that we should directly move to no-ops. We should stay DevOps, and first we should find no-ops solutions to our existing projects, and step by step move to a no-ops. Thank you.
So we will have Janita summing up everything on behalf of those who are for no-ops.
All right. Does this thing do a difference? I mean, does it work? Should I just say it? Yeah. So, in summary of no-ops, basically, what we said was that in the past, we've seen servers which are it's gonna make it fun. Okay. Anyways, for the sake of drama, in the past we had things that had to be managed on site. We needed an ops team, and then we moved to a state where we can outsource part of it to the cloud and let them take care of it. Now we are at a state which we are moving comfortably towards, automating the whole thing and letting a third party take care of it, which is the whole point of serverless. So I would like to bring up certain things, certain occurrences in the previous proposal speech. So Asiri said, devs are concerned only on what they do and not concerned about operations. That's absolutely a terrific thing in my opinion, because back in the day, I'm speaking in the future tense in a way, because back in the day when DevOps was the culture, developers had to worry about what operations do. I mean, there was a time where we would just chuck it over the wall and the operations team had to, figure out how to deploy it. Right now, all the developers have to do in the future with no ops in place is just figure out what the business needs and build that, and not worry about how it's going to be, how it's going to run on a specific version of Linux or whatever of the sort. So that's a good thing in that sense. As for Milindu's statement about the servers running out of memory, that's a terrible, how do you say it? A sad thing that can happen. It's happened to all of us, that we forgot to set the logs to rotate, or we forgot to set the right amount of memory for anything. So giving that responsibility to entirely a third party is going to be definitely a wonderful thing. We can still monitor the logs. It will be available on separate places as and when necessary, but we won't have to worry about servers running out of space or resources, because servers will not be managed by us. So all in all, in summary of the NoOps team, NoOps is the future, which can be achieved through serverless computing and having a bunch of virtual monkeys play around in production environments. So all in all, I think it's time to start moving towards the future. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Supun, you're up next to sum up the argument on behalf of DevOps.
Yeah, so I would like to start with saying that great power comes with great responsibility. But with DevOps in hand, great responsibility will lead towards great power. So how would that happen? Let me explain. So DevOps is all about providing the ownership towards its individual teams. And teams, when they have the ownership, more or less, they have to take the responsibility in the services that they provide. So the model itself will make sure that each and every team is responsible for the service that they provide. So whatever happens, that even the servers go down or anything, these teams will make sure that it up and run 24/7 and resolve any functions smoothly. So this will make the software development lifecycle process and the steps of each of these more appropriate. And when we practice this approach across the organization, it will help each and every team to make the best responsibility, and then overall the entire organization as well. So Janet pointed out something on heading towards serverless. So I would like to say that serverless is more or less an advanced DevOps tooling mechanism, which falls under the same DevOps umbrella as well. And when giving the responsibility entirely to a third-party company, the responsibility will be less, and the customers will be not trusting that much the company. So how we can automate the effort that is required to change from one service provider to another? Can we automate that as well? That will be a really cost. It will incur so many cost, and it will take so much effort from the company itself. So, and Pulasti mentioned that we can deploy with a single click of a button. So what I would like to say is, can we completely eliminate someone's engagement here? Because there are like so many documents and FAQs that third party needs to read and understand. So that will be difficult without the engagement of any developer at all. So in a hypothetical scenario, that would be going to a serverless environment would be possible, but for now, and even having this environment, that wouldn't be that easy or possible. So, and you mentioned about Chaos Monkey as well, right? So there, I think you might forgot to tell something that how Netflix almost lost all its business when AWS decided to restart its servers, right? So that can impact the entire business. So having a separate third party to handle everything. So in that same document, they have mentioned that they almost lost all its business due to this AWS server restarting. So and Namdullah said that although in an ideal scenario that we need to have softwares that need to be properly tested and everything should function properly. So I think if you have read the news a few days back, that Apple, a single Telugu symbol, how that got the entire application to affected. So likewise, there are pros and cons of this approach as well. So I think in an ideal scenario, having a DevOps practice will make more sense than having going towards a no-ops environment at all. So with that, I think I can conclude my story. Yes.
Thank you very much, gents, for basically putting forward all those very interesting arguments and shedding some light on the pros and cons of DevOps and of no-ops as well. I would like to open the floor for any questions from our audience. Come on, guys. I'm sure you must be having something to ask either of the two teams here. Yeah, Prashita? Okay, well then I suppose it looks like everyone is quite convinced with what they heard and that they don't really have too many questions. Were very well and clear. So let's go for a show of hands for DevOps. You can raise your hands as well if you all. All right, and for no ops. Okay, that looks like a 50-50 to me, does it? Okay, all right, guys, thank you very much for your participation.